Welcome to You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker, a podcast to encourage and equip moms along their parenting journey. Join Sarah each week as she interviews dads and moms like you and discusses the joys, challenges, and rewards of raising kids.
Hi, and welcome to You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker. I am so glad you joined me. Today, I'm with Courtney Messick of GraceGrowEdify.com. She is someone who coaches new and not so new homeschoolers on streamlining homeschooling. She's a mom, and we're going to talk about friends today. Specifically our children's friends. I don't know what it is about our kids and their friends, but that can really tie a mom up in knots, can it, Courtney?
Absolutely, I agree.
There was I'm going to start with a little story about my kids, because, I always love to talk about my kids. For those listeners who don't know, I have 2 girls and 2 boys, and my 2 girls are now in high school, and my 2 boys are in upper elementary school. But one of my daughters, who shall remain nameless to protect her privacy, had gotten to a squabble. She was about 8 or 9 with the girl across the street who was around her age. Now, her older sister and her, they played together. The trio played together quite nicely. But one summer they went through, I swear, it was like the rockiest patch. Someone was always coming home in tears. And this particular daughter was just not handling that friend thing right. And I could feel myself getting a little anxious about it. I mean, these are 8-year-old girls. They're going to have their ups, their downs. They're around, they're going to have those kind of things. But why do you think we take it so personally when our kids have friend trouble?
I think as parents, we feel so deeply for our kids. We want to see them succeed. We want to see them making solid connections. So it's almost just heart-wrenching when that doesn't work out.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And so often we want to step in and fix it.
Yes. I catch myself trying to keep myself from doing that quite often, actually. And I think with girls, too, it's just girls are a different complexity than boys sometimes.
Yeah, I know. My boys, they have their friend squabbles, too, but usually it blows over and, a minute or 2 later, they're all right as rain, playing just fine.
Exactly. Yeah, girls are just a little bit slightly different, I think. I think the best thing I think that I can do personally for me and my daughter is just modeling, doing our best to model that good social behavior. And when they see us resolving conflict well within our own friends and our own small groups and community, that can help them to just kind of, parallel that. But it is so hard.
Yeah, and I think that there's always that fine line, too, between being that sympathetic ear when they have friend trouble and kind of encouraging them to be gossipy or, maybe blow a hurt out of proportion. I think for me, that's that balancing act that you kind of alluded to a little bit about how to obviously show our kids that we care about them, but also we have to do that modeling. We have to do that guidance and training to show them, I know, he hurt your feelings, but, let's look at your reaction too, and let's think about how you can, what's the way forward for this? Do you have any advice or anything that you found that works well with you as a mom with your kids to help them kind of see their way out of a particular, hurt or, spat with their friends?
Sure. I think it's a life skill to teach our children to be self-aware. I know for myself, and as I grew into adulthood, that was, it took some self-training to be self-aware and to know, when you need to self-evaluate and say, did I hurt someone else's feelings? Is there something that I did to maybe contribute to the spat? Because it's very easy to point the finger when we're children and say he did or she did, or, and kind of wallow in our own feelings. And so for us, I try to help my children, evaluate that. Is there something that you could have done differently? It's a fantastic, actually teachable moment for us to take these situations and turn them into just a really good lesson between us and our kids, and open up that dialogue where we can kind of go through the situation and decide, was there something that we could have done different? Evaluate how we possibly hurt someone's feelings, or maybe we said the wrong thing, or we gauged the situation wrong. And so, even though it's so hurtful to go through with your children, sometimes I've just tried to learn to appreciate these moments because they are teachable moments.
Yeah, and I love the teachable moment aspect of parenting. I think that's one of my favorites too, especially when I dig deep into my own life and I share those honest, problems I've had with friends, or remember from my own, teenage years. My girls are teenagers now, and share kind of my own problems with friends or a similar situation, because that really kind of shows them that you're listening, that you care, and that there's a solution. And hey, mom lived through it. Maybe maybe they will too. And I think the other thing that can concern us about friends is when we have kids who maybe don't collect as many friends. I know. With my 4 kids, it's kind of interesting to see their own friend dynamic. Like my second born is a girl, and she's shyer. She has friends, but it's a little bit of a family joke. Her siblings joke with her a little bit about, oh yeah, she really does have friends, kind of thing, because she doesn't talk about them that much. And I'm not concerned. She's a lot like me at that age, where I prefer to be by myself a lot, and I was perfectly happy with that. But how concerned should we be with whether our kids have friends? I think this is a conversation that I often have with other parents.
Sure. I find myself trying to be very intentional in this area because we're homeschoolers. This is even something that sometimes there's more of a spotlight on, because my daughter's not going to a classroom every day and sitting with, 20 other peers. So we have to kind of really focus on maybe getting out there a little bit more, putting forth more effort into finding community and finding peers and solid connections. So we talk about this quite often, and I try to keep an open dialogue with my daughter about this. I don't ever worry, because I do think that it'll all eventually work itself out. Childhood, right?
Yes.
But I do try to be intentional in that area, just in terms of, again, another, good open dialogue about, we don't all, we have this conversation often in our home. We don't always hit it off with everyone on the first meeting. And, being intentional and continuing to plug in and continuing to try to build connections. For some of us takes time, especially like you said, maybe more of an introverted child or, things like that. We kind of have to foster those relationships along and help them find solid connections. That's just another thing that I think is a continuing conversation and open dialogue, and to help them. And like you said, letting them know that you're there to talk and keeping that conversation going helps support them, I think, in their efforts to connect with others.
Yeah, and I think that I think with all of my children, I have had, especially when they were around 3rd or 4th grade, had a conversation with them, private conversation with them, when they came to me, worried about friends, whether they had one or wanted one or didn't have, something had gone wrong or something like that. And I think of some of the things that I tried to encourage them with, that old adage, to have friends, you must be a friend. And to have them flip it on its edge, instead of worrying about what they didn't have, was to think about what they did have and what they could offer and the things that they could change. Because as we know as adults, or we should know as adults, the only person we can change is ourselves. We can't make another person be our friend. But we can show them, kindness. We can, show, be the kind of friend that we want to have. So, for example, for my kids, I was reminded them, well, if you're kind to them, why don't you speak to them first? Why don't you, ask them to play first instead of always waiting? Why don't you approach someone who's standing on the outskirts of the group at recess? So what are some of the things that maybe you've done in your family to encourage your kids to, to be that friend?
Absolutely. I think that, first of all, I love that. I adore that. To be a friend, you have to be the friend you would want to have, and I think that it's, like you said, just kind of encouraging that. For us in particular, whenever we go to any kind of event or any kind of just anything that requires social interaction, I try to model that for my children, because it's hard for us to tell them one thing and do another. So I want them to see me going up and striking up conversations with others and making it look easy, because I don't want them to have anxiety about that or apprehension about that. So if they can see me doing it, and then when I go to tell them to do it as well, it just reinforces that, rather than me telling them how to do it, and I'm not making that effort. So that's one thing, is just to model. And I think just to continue to encourage them to keep plugging back in. That's just the thing with friendships. We don't all walk away with the best lifelong friend after one meeting. It takes time to nurture a relationship. So I just, continue to encourage them to plug back in, to continue to go and meet people, strike up conversations, and natural friendships usually are born somewhere in there.
Right. And I mean, there are those natural friendships. I think we can all probably name one or two people who we hit it off from the instant that we met.
Sure.
And those are precious and those are great. But I think we also have stories about a friend who became very dear to us gradually over time, because we both made the effort to get to know one another, to kind of get beyond that first impression. I'm always telling my kids, you have to give them a chance. And a chance is not 30 seconds. A chance is several times, because, kids have bad days, and you can have a bad day, they can have a bad day. But if you can tell that there's still interests that kind of line up with yours, for example, you both like to collect Pokemon cards or something, then it's kind of maybe worth the effort to try more than once. Not trying to send a kid out to keep trying and trying and trying if the other person is just not interested at all. But I think we give up too easy on friendships.
I agree. And I think for children too, and you're right, they may see another child and then think, oh, well, I'm not going to connect with that child. She doesn't look like me, or we don't like the same thing. And you're right, trying to find that common ground, something that you're both interested in, or something that you both, agree on, that you can talk about. And also just encouraging them, because it's true, sometimes some of our best friendships are found out of, the most unlikely friend, the most unlikely person that we would have never imagined that we would hit it off with, because, opposites attract on a lot of occasions. And so it's really helpful to let them know that, hey, don't judge a book by its cover, give it a little bit of a chance. And you're right, if they continue to try and plug in and they're just not making any headway, then yes, maybe moving on and trying elsewhere. But I think that definitely giving people a chance and trying to, and helping them, giving them some good conversation starters, or giving them some good ways to, because we tell our kids, hey, go out there and try and plug in with that person or make friends. But if we don't give them some suggestions, or maybe do some role play on how that would actually look in everyday conversation, give them some ideas on different things they could ask other children, or different ways to start up a conversation or find some common ground, is a really great way to help them and help them foster this along.
Yeah, I love that, Courtney. The conversation starters at our dinner table. We often we'll ask each, go around, every person says something about their day. That's our default. But when we're feeling especially creative, we throw in things like, well, what made you smile today? What kind thing did you do for someone? Or we'll do other kind of more unique conversational starters. And then sometimes we do talk about how to be a friend and how to make friends and how to talk with someone that you don't know, because like you said, we're all in those situations where we have to talk to people that we don't know very well. And how do you get over that awkward stage? And it's partly just putting ourselves out there, and it's partly having those conversation starters kind of in our back pocket that we can kind of mentally pull out and go, I don't know what to say. I'll talk about, oh, right, Mom said, maybe these ideas. And then, because, chances are the other person is just feeling just as awkward as we are, right? I mean, we often think we are the only awkward person standing there. And when you start that conversation, sometimes, I can't believe how many times I've learned that the person was like, I'm so glad you came over to talk to me, because they were feeling just as awkward as I was.
Right. And I think this is such an important life skill. Because having those conversation starters and knowing what to say and how to strike up a conversation, this is going to come in handy and serve them well, once they are adults and they are in college or they're trying to get a job. It just comes in handy. There's no reason not to help them through that.
Exactly. There is no reason not to. And then as our kids get older, though, our ability to control their friends becomes a little more tricky. And I know that parents of teens are more concerned about what type of friend they have, because peers become more and more important to a teen, whether they're homeschooled or public school or private school. That desire to have, find your people kind of a thing can lead to some less than desirable friends. So far, so good for me and my teenage daughters. But my plan is if they ever, and we have a very open door policy, I guess I'll say, with friends. There are more than any of my children's friends are more than welcome to come play in our yard, come eat my food, come hang out at our house anytime. And I think
that's awesome.
That for us, we love getting to know those friends, because this is where my children are spending their time. And one really quick story, when my sons were younger, there was a boy that was the same age and the same grade as my oldest son. And I learned that he was using some pretty foul language. For like an 8-year-old at the time, it was quite astonishing. He lived in a house that had older siblings and cousins or somebody, much older teenagers around, and he just was picking up on their language. And so my boys were picking up on it. I had no idea what they were saying. Some very awkward moments at the dinner table one night. You can just let your imagination think about what was said. I was like, oh my goodness, we need to have a conversation. And it turned out where they had heard them. And I knew this boy, this neighbor, could control that, because I heard he wasn't saying this on the bus. He wasn't saying this at school. And so I said, okay, this is a less than desirable friend for my boys, because I didn't want them using that language or thinking it was okay. Even though they really didn't know what it meant, they kind of knew it wasn't okay. And so I just talked to this little boy. I just said, you know that language isn't right. So here's the deal. If you continue to use it, I'm sorry that, my 2 boys are not going to be able to play with you. But I know that you can control it, and I know you're going to choose the right thing. And Funky, that was the last conversation I had with him, and he's been a good friend and never uses, maybe a slip once or twice, but honestly, it's been several years and it's been great. So how do you, but that's a young kid. It's not a teenager who's trying to sneak off. So, do you have any ideas on what parents can do when you see your kid hooking up with, I don't mean that hooking up in like the regular vernacular, but just hanging out, having friends who maybe are doing things that we don't think is so great?
Sure. First off, that's a very encouraging story, that you shared about your son. And, sometimes, and I was going to say, it's very brave of you, because sometimes we just let the relationship go. And a lot of parents are afraid to reach out to the child or reach out to the parents. And then, a relationship is lost. So that's encouraging that you spoke to him and the relationship lasted. So, but yeah, I think that keeping an open dialogue, especially with your teens, that's really, I keep going back to that, because I think that is our saving grace when we get into these situations, especially into their teen years, because then being able to come and talk to us about these things, and if they share with us something about a friend, or they can tell us, a friend did this or said this and things like that, if we can use, again, those teachable moments to share with them, hey, whatever it is that child's going through or whatever, that's not the type of, people that we want to be, and that's not what we're trying to cultivate, and just kind of using it as a teachable moment, because you can't control what these other children are saying. You can't control what the friends are doing. So all you can control, like you said in the beginning, is our own children or what goes on in our own home. So I just think that having an open dialogue and having a safe space where your children know that they can come talk to you about these things, because they're probably feeling uncomfortable. If these aren't things that are being said on the regular in their homes or in their small circles, and they hear these, different words or different stories and things like that, they're probably uncomfortable and not sure how to handle it. So then being able to come to you and you just even being able to have a conversation with them about it, I feel is pretty essential, especially in the teen years.
No, I think that's great. Some great words of wisdom there, Courtney. And just that to not shut the door on, hearing about these friends, getting to know these friends, and kind of gently coming alongside and pointing out maybe some of the ways that these friends maybe are not, living or doing that's right. But also you want to keep that dialogue, because you want to know if your kid is ever in trouble, that they feel comfortable calling you and you're just going to come get them and not ask those kind of questions right then.
Absolutely.
Because that's what we need. We want our kids to know that mom and dad are safe places for them to share things and to to help take them out of those situations. Well, I really appreciate you talking with me today about friendship and friends. And this is, you've been listening to You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker and my guest Courtney Messick with GraceGrowEdify.com. I hope you'll join me next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast of You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker. Sign up to receive notification of new podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhamaker.com. Until next time, remember, parenting might be hard sometimes, but don't worry, you've got this.